Howdy brewers. A few people have asked about if I could do like a top tips video. So I'm just going to run you through while I'm doing a brew day as well. So first thing I do, get out everything I need for the brew day. Now because I'm brewing a dark beer today, being a porter, I'm not going to add any brewing salts because I think there'll be enough of the specialty grains to bring the pH down to the target. If there isn't, then I'll add some, but I'll let you know that is if it's needed. So get my ingredients out. This is my bucket that I normally weigh my grains in before I throw it in the mill. Scales out, scissors, tape to tape up the grain bags, all my stainless steel that I need for my brewing, and the grain fathers out. So first thing I do when actually getting the hardware ready is this baby. Now I know the instructions say to put the rubber seal on the other side, but I've found that it's getting coming off easier with age or something, but when I give it a whirlpool, it's been popping off. So I have it up against a temperature probe, and I use a thermometer now in the mash and whatnot to make sure the temperature's right. Now before I go and bother crushing the grains, because it takes a while for the water to come to temperature, I fill this up with hot water from the tap. So I put the hose down, pump some water in through the pump, so it comes out, gives the pump a bit of a rinse. Hose down the sides. The other thing rinsing it with hot water does is brings the stainless steel, increases the temperature of the stainless steel, because that takes a bit out when you're filling it up. Normally I pour it on the garden, but for the sake of this video I'm just going to pour it on the cement. So now I can fill this. I'm not filling it at a great rate, because what I'm going to do is another top tip. Going to go weigh my grains while this is filling up. One thing I like to do when weighing up my specialty grains, saves me having to worry about making a mistake, is I reset the scales every time, so then that way I don't have to worry about adding up in my head. I can do it, but if there's distractions around, like little kids or something, it takes away the risk. There. And there. So that's all my specialty grains weighed out. When you finish with weighing your grains out, tape up the bags. Keeps any nasty bugs out or rodents. As a double precaution, I like to keep my bags in a sealable plastic drum. So while this is heating, I will now save a bit more time by going to crush my grains. I probably don't need to do this every time, but I do for peace of mind, is measure the gap between my mill rollers. I like 1.4 mil or 1.4 millimeters. So I can push it through. I know it's 1.4 mil. I like to make sure, check the battery's fully charged on the drill. The last thing you want is to run out of battery while you're mid crushing. Okay, with my drill settings, I like to have it on the low speed and also on a lowish gear. And I have it on the screw setting, and that's to increase the torque. I don't believe getting it on the hammer setting will makes much of a difference. It just makes a lot more noise. What I do like to use is this clamp. And the other thing you need to make sure you do is have it in forwards. And I like to get it going before I throw the grains in. That helps it take the grain straight away. It doesn't matter if you throw your specialty grains or your base grain in first, or you mix them all together, as long as they all get crushed. with the clamp, I can now leave this and go and do other things to set up my brew day.
Okay, so I've got 12 litres to sparge with. The way I approach my sparge is that I only put in the sparge water heater what I need to sparge with. That way I don't have to worry about keeping count on how much I've sparged with. It's just one more place that error can creep in if you're distracted or whatnot. You don't need to keep tote marks or anything like that. So yeah, if you sparge with the volume you need to, shouldn't have an issue. Time to mash in the porter. So after you mash in, leave the top plate off. It just makes it easier to be able to stir the grain bed a few times for the first half of the mash. One thing I've found, it was always puzzling for me why when the first half of the mash I would see this foam. Now granted, I'm using darker grains, more proteins, but so there's some protein causing the bubbles in the grain, but the other thing is that I'm actually releasing a lot of the gas or air that is that was in the grain bed, because the more I stir it, the more air comes out, and then eventually these bubbles dissipate and there's just liquid and grains in there with no gas. So if you've got air in your mash or bubbles in your mash, don't worry about it. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. One last stir before we put the top plate on. And the water hasn't, the mash water hasn't come up any higher to the overflow pipe. If you were worried, I left the grain stopper in there. When the crush is right, and you know your system, you can do that. I've been using this for a few years now, so I've got some. I know what I can get away with. Last stir, I like to make sure, touch everywhere. I like to feel the bottom plate with the paddle. When I can feel the metal on metal, I know that I've done the whole grain bed. And just turn the pump off for a second. And I'll leave that go for another 30 minutes. Another top tip that I use, another top tip, see where I've got the hose hitting the handle on the top plate? That's to baffle the water, and that way I shouldn't create any channels. If I have it going straight onto the top plate, even though that should act as a baffle enough, sometimes I take the top plate off and there is an indentation where the the pump was pumping straight onto. So this, I've found, has stopped that. Whether a channel formed or not, I'm not sure, but I know that this means that I don't get any channel. Okay, we're about 5 minutes from the scheduled end of the mash. Just get a gravity reading. So I've got 1061. Now we'll just see what that is at the hour mark. If it's gone up a couple of points, then I'll leave it go for another 10 minutes. If it's the same, then I know that I'm got my maximum efficiency that I'm going to get out of this mash at the temperature. So what I like to do to save time is I flick it over to the boil. Make sure you've got both elements and you turn it on the normal, so you've got the 2000 watts going through. Another top tip I've got is I like to use a very sensitive scale for weighing out my hops. That's because The threshold on the bigger scales on when they actually measure 1 gram is a lot higher, so I like to the more sensitive scales allow for more accurate hop measurements. Another top tip to get the grain, any grains that might have made their way from the mash into the boil kettle, I just have this little strainer and just to catch any grains. See, there's a few in there, but not too many. Anyway, I catch the grains, and then that way there's not as much mess at the bottom, stuck to the bottom when I clean up. And also, if they're going to extract any bitterness or tannins, then this helps get it out. Okay, we're at the end of the boil. It's 1 hour, and I don't want any more bitterness to go into the beer from the hops. So I'll take the hop spider out. I'll just let it drain all the liquid out. One of my other top tips, besides getting a plate chiller, that one's a 40 plate chiller, but there are many out there. I just have the 40 plate one. Is I chill the wort, I chill the wort in the grain father, so everything drops out before it hits the fermenter. I've found that I have had cleaner tasting beers by keeping the proteins, or as many as possible, out of the fermenter, whereas if you chill and go straight into the fermenter, all those proteins are going to drop out into the fermenter and potentially change the flavour of your beer. I'm not saying it makes it better or worse. I'm saying that I have had nicer results by doing this. Right. Another one of my tips is to have the temperature probe, attach it to the outside of the fermenter. You can put it inside if you want, but I just don't like, once it's sealed, I don't like to do much with the fermenter. It's important when you're adding your yeast to aerate your wort. So this is a wort aerator that I've had a friend make for me.